Right, this is a tutorial to show how to make a grass brush in ArtRage. So initially I took a picture of some grass on some white paper, just pulled some out my lawn and sprinkled it on top. So now I'm just going to manipulate it in Picasa, and just to tidy things up a little bit. So I'll probably crop it and contrast it. So I've done auto contrast there just to bring out the whites in the background a little bit more, and now I'm going to crop it just to take the extra stuff around my picture away. It might make life a little bit easier. And now I'm going to play around with the filling the light so it brings the background to be a little bit whiter, which make life easier and takes as much of the shadow out from my camera as possible. Just playing around with the light settings to see what works best. Okay, that'll do. So let's save this. So save a copy. And now I can import that into ArtRage. So I've already imported it into ArtRage 32-bit and used the kill white feature to take the background out. So this is what I've got. It's a PNG which I've imported in, so the background former white will be transparent. So here I'm setting the canvas background to black to see whether there's any other bits that kill white hasn't quite taken out, and as you can see in the top right hand corner there's a few bits there which I'm just removing with the eraser. Here I'm just using the colour blend mode to make things a more uniform green, because there were some grey areas there, just to make the grass a little bit more consistent. And here I'm just tidying up the edges just for my own preference. Right, I think that will do. So I'm going to export the PNG. So the background is now transparent. So I'll save it as something meaningful. So I'll be ready to import it into ArtRage stickers so I can start creating my sticker brush. So my idea for this brush is to be able to create easily almost a canvas of grass which looks quite natural. So I thought I would start off with just a small pile of grass which I can multiply up using the sticker spray. So usual stuff here in ArtRage, creating a sticker, giving it a name. I'll import my PNG into the colour upper layer and take the shadow off. I don't usually have that. And this will just be a straightforward image that I'll put in. I haven't coloured it red or anything, as I may do to tie it to any colour that you may pick. All I wanted it to do was just to look like grass, and just to have a grass colour, which obviously is going to be green in most cases. So that's a sticker created. Now I'm going to use that sticker as part of a sticker brush and play around with the settings. So I'm just creating a new canvas, just something standard really, just 2000 by 2000. Let's take that black background off. So just selecting the sticker spray. It's set on a spray brush which I created a while ago, and now I'm just going to apply the sticker of grass onto it. As you can see, yeah, the colour doesn't quite look right, but that's okay. I think if you just change the colour to red, it will bring out its natural colour. So already it looks alright. I'm starting to be able to build up some grass textures. Which obviously look quite realistic. But I'm going to start playing around with the spray variation. See what I can do with it. I think I want to rotate this around a little bit to make it look even more realistic and more variable. So yeah, the first thing, let's try an image brush just to see what it does. It's just going to give a smooth stream of grass. Yeah, that kind of looks quite interesting. It's like a 3D aspect to it. Takes quite a lot of CPU this though, so there'll be quite a lot of lag on it because the spray rate is right up and it's rendering the grass image quite quickly. Just playing around with the offset a little bit, so that seems to give some really good variation. That's some things I forget quite a lot when I use the object spray setting. Automatically the auto flatten isn't selected, so that means once selected that it will just flatten all your individual grass images to the layer. But if you don't have it selected, which is not selected by default, it will treat each one as an individual object. So which may have its benefits because you can move each one individually around, but I don't really like that. I just want to flatten it away. So there we go. So I've got a bit of rotation, a bit of random rotation, set at almost 3 o'clock, and basic object spray setting seems to work quite well. Just zooming in, checking the fidelity of it, the resolution of it. Not bad really. It looks a lot better than my garden. It looks a lot better than my grass. Playing around with the rotation again. Generally always put rotation up to the maximum random value, so it could be any rotation from 0 to 360 degrees. So already I've got quite a nice potential thick texture of grass which I could use for something. And changing the brush size obviously for variation is quite an easy thing to do. I've got the scale applied, so I've got pen pressure associated with the size of the grass just for some natural variation. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. So let's create a new preset. Attach an icon image to it. I've already laid something down so I can just take a little snapshot of that massive grass I've got there. And then give it a meaningful name and put it in a meaningful category. Random now, it's more of a nature stamp. So ArtRage comes with a lot of sticker brush presets, a lot of good ones in nature stamp, so why not just stick it in there for consistency. So in this case I've called something grass, which I suspect it's quite a common name, and there already exists something in that category called grass, and each item needs to be named uniquely, so I just had to change it. So I'm just going through the presets and just checking that it appears there. So there we go, real grass. So it's there along with all the other predefined ArtRage presets. So now I just want to play around with it a little bit, just to see if I can get some decent variation. I think it looks fine at the moment for just a standard grass reproduction, but I want to play around with possibly the hue and maybe luminance. I think the luminance may look quite good to get a more rough looking type of lawn. So here I'm using the pen pressure to get some kind of perspective potentially. So further away the brush looks a bit smaller, and closer it looks a bit larger. And there's some luminance variation in there, not a massive amount, but just enough to make things look quite interesting. Maybe looking a bit like maybe a more natural garden, or maybe a thicker lawn potentially, with lots of shadows going on. Looks almost a bit more interesting, a bit more hedge-like potentially. And again, could look very good for building up a background of texture. Just builds a little bit more form with the luminance because of all the shadows and the contrast in light and dark. So again, I think I'm happy with that. So let's do what we did before. Search around for something that looks interesting, which is representative of what I've got. Again, give it a unique name. Realer grass, because I think this almost looks a little bit more real than my previous set because of all the shadows. So now just playing around again with things. Thought I'd play around with the Y distance, which gives you some form of perspective. So the further down the canvas that you go, the larger in size. In this case, the scale will scale upwards. So just because before we were looking at a top view almost of grass, which can be a bit boring if you're trying to encompass it in a 3D scene. But this gives you a little bit more perspective. So I'm just dragging down with a consistent pen pressure to the bottom, and the brush is just getting slightly larger, so you get a bit of perspective involved, which looks a little bit interesting. Go, filled the whole canvas up. It almost looks like it's on at that slight angle there. Just checking the resolution again, looks pretty decent. And now I'm just playing around a little bit. I thought I've got quite a decent background there, so I might just want to save this as a pattern, which I can use potentially for using in the fill tool, or maybe just as a standard background. So here I've got the fill tool, so I'm now going to select the background that I've just saved and just see what happens. I've no real idea, but it's an easy way for me just to fill an area full of grass if I wanted to. If I didn't want to use the brush to fill it up, I could just fill it. So here's ones I've created previously, which are just general pictures from my camera, and there we go at the bottom. So now I'm probably going to fill around with scale and just see what happens when I fill this blank canvas up. Just playing around. So as you can see, there's a line separating the canvas, but I'm not too bothered about that necessarily. Just playing around to see what effects. So that's a larger scale now. This will probably become more useful when I'm filling in selections potentially. If I just want a quick fill of grass in whatever I want, or maybe even overlaying this as a texture on something using a blend mode. So now I've just created a layer over the top of it. I'm just experimenting with layering using different blend modes. Just seeing if I get some kind of weird effect that might be quite interesting. A difference I always quite like using in this case, because you never quite know what you're going to get. Already that's, could be used as quite a darker scene of grass. And then using the fill at different angles on one on top of the other can be quite interesting as well. So you can get lots of variation with the blend modes if you're not quite happy with the initial fill that you've got.